Um, so I guess I was actually sort of in the blur between sort of the breakout rooms, which we didn't quite do. We did one big room. I guess a question I'm interested in really with my meetup group hat on is how many people are joining us today? Then this is the first time that you've come to one of our virtual meetups. You can react, chat, or just unmute yourself to say, or you could do Musha's, dance.
First time.
All right, cool.
I was at the online summit last week. What was and they mentioned that there was a meetup here. Was it the online? Yeah, the AWS Summit online. So yeah. That's how I got plugged in.
Awesome. So, well, thanks for joining for the people that are new and for the people that are returning. That's fantastic. In a couple of weeks, we have Cloud Zero doing another a talk, which should be pretty interesting. So yeah, and give us feedback. Keep it going. We're trying to figure out how to best make this engaging and useful. So Jen will send out a link in the chat later on. So feel free to please tell us, be honest, so that we can just tune this as best we can. All right, let's see if I can. Oh, hey, Brian, could you enable screen sharing for me or anyone?
You should be able to. Yes, now you can.
Okay, even better. Let me present. Sorry, folks, I'm just gonna share. I think that's it. Okay, can you see my screen? Of course, I can't see any of you anymore, so so nodding won't work. I have no idea where the Zoom window went. Just give me one more sec. Get too many monitors. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so well, again, so thanks everyone for joining. There's obviously we got a mix of people that come to these meetups between experience and skill sets and interests. So I'm going to try to do some things that hopefully will cut across different interests. I'll talk about this the survival guide and some tools and strategies for keeping up with AWS and really getting the most out of it. I have a demo of one of those tools, which is my startup Cloud Pegboard. It's a free service that helps you keep up with AWS and find information faster. So I'll show you that a bit. And we have a AWS credits giveaway. If anyone needs some credits, then there'll be an opportunity to do that. Then I'm going to talk about a serverless fault-tolerant architecture and disaster-tolerant architecture that I use for Cloud Pegboard, which I think get a little bit of an architectural discussion going as well. And then we have one more giveaway of even more credits at the end. So that's sort of a little bit of a roadmap of what we're going to talk about. And also, feel free to interrupt me. Because of the way I have my screens here, you might need to yell at me and Brian if someone's trying to break in and I don't see them, just do something nasty to me. Anyway, so feel free to interrupt. This is, a meetup in general is a better, more interactive form than, let's say, a talk at reInvent. But even now that we've moved to being virtual, it should be even more casual and better to have it be interactive. So feel free. So with that, quick introduction who I am. I've been using AWS since around 2010. Like I said, a year and a half ago, I started this startup, Cloud Pegboard. That's sort of my full-time job. And not sort of, it is my full-time job, but I have another thing I also do is I'm the volunteer CTO for this charity called Miles for Migrants. And we use donated frequent flyer miles to help reunite refugees and asylum seekers with family around the world. And of course, I'm also an organizer of the Boston AWS Meetup Group and work with Jen and Brian. And thank you guys, Jen and Brian, who you guys probably don't realize there's a ton of work that gets done in the back, behind the scenes to keep this all organized and smooth. And so, and Brian's the master Zoom guide now. So anyway, awesome. Thanks for that. Also because it's relevant. The job I had before doing this startup, I've done startups and I've also worked in really, really big companies, at one point IBM with 430,000 people and then back down to one. But my most recent job before Cloud Pegboard, for 6 years, I ran engineering as the executive director of engineering for Novartis Research in Cambridge. And there I did a bunch of different things in that role. One of them, of course, was cloud. We were a fully on-prem organization, and I moved us to the cloud starting in 2015. I wrote the strategy and moved us there. And in the process, onboarded over 500 individual engineers and informaticians to our platform. And in doing that, I realized that, well, a problem I had, and I think all of us have, is it's hard to keep up, right? And then I realized the cost it took for me and my teams and all these other people that I was, bringing on to this platform, that it was a big effort to keep up and understand the scope. And one of the things I realized is, I ran this architecture council, and people would come and present some really neat architectures and designs and say, that's great. And was there any reason that you decided to build this cluster, let's say maybe an Elasticsearch cluster or something like that yourself, instead of using a managed service that already does that? And surprisingly often the answer would be, oh, I didn't know that existed. And which is a good reason why we have reviews. And sometimes it was more subtle things, but so this was a problem. I did some things internally to try to mitigate that, but really this is not, it had nothing to do with life sciences. This was something that had to do with anybody using AWS. Their pace of growth is huge and dynamic, and really needed a better way. So that was the inspiration that caused me to decide that basically reInvent 2018. I was talking to a bunch of people, and the conversation is always, oh yeah, this is all exciting, but how am I going to keep up? And I said, I'm telling you, I got frustrated. I'm just going to do something about this. So that's where we are. Let's see here. Okay. So as Brian said in the invite, this was originally a talk I gave at Startup Central at reInvent in December. It's changed a bit, but you may see some old references and such. So I crossed out the reInvent and made it to be the Boston version. And so, some of us are older and some of us newer, and if I kind of go back earlier in my career, we all know that success as technologists depends on our currency. And it used to be that the technologies was a fairly small set when you think about it, certainly compared to now working in the cloud. And so you could kind of keep up. And if you look at my pal Scotty here, right, he seems to know everything about everything and able to solve every problem in an instant. And that's what that value of having knowledge is just kind of in your head can bring to bear. The problem is most of us, even though some of us have virtual backgrounds, are nonfiction. And so we need a different strategy than just sort of knowing everything about everything. And so that's really what I want to talk about today is some strategies and techniques to help keep up so that you can really get the most out of AWS and do that with a lot less stress. So, we know, like I said, that keeping up with one or a handful of services or languages, whatever it may be, is reasonably challenging. But at the pace of AWS, it's really quite daunting, I think. And the image I have that comes into my head whenever I think about it is this one here. We have on the back of a pack of cyclists, and I'm just pedaling as fast as I can to keep up. But these guys are better than me. They're all going faster and faster, and they're incented to move forward. And each one of these cyclists is a different service team. And now imagine they're all racing ahead of you, because that's their job, is to advance, but you really want to keep up with them. But now they start spontaneously generating new racers. And I'm thinking, oh my God, the field is bigger now, and I'm still just me. And the metaphor doesn't really hold because, of course, they're all on one road. But in reality, with AWS, they're all in different directions. That Security Hub is different than RDS. It's just they're just in different dimensions and going different ways. And so we all want to be like Scotty and know everything about everything. But AWS has this unfair advantage that they can keep pouring money in and hiring yet another two-pizza team again and again. And so they can expand, they can scale horizontally and vertically, really. But each of us is at this disadvantage that we can't scale. So it just dilutes us further and further. And so what do we do about that? So that's why I think it's important to come up with a strategy. And the choice is great. I think it's a challenge, but I wouldn't give up the choice of the breadth of services that AWS has for the world. It's that's huge value. So that's huge value that you can grab a service off the shelf and just get some work done. I have this, I won't go into it now because it's a little bit long, but I hired this very young college intern. She had just finished her freshman year last summer, and I asked her to do this problem, and basically in a day, and she knew nothing about the cloud. She had 1 year of CS behind her, and she was able to use Comprehend to solve a problem I gave her. And it's like, wow, right? So the choice is great, but the information overload that comes along with it is a real problem. It's a, it is an inhibition. So how do we get the value of the choice without drowning in information, and so we can really find the right stuff in these gems? Okay, my dog's going to make this really hard. Okay, so that's our problem. So let me unpack that a little bit. So as of the end of last year, AWS had 2,000 announcements, right? And that's, you can see here, that's exponential growth. There are 2,500 blog posts last year, and you can see that is also growing exponentially. And there's lots of different ways of counting services. But no matter how you count them, each one of them is also growing exponentially. Thank you. My dog always picks up the noisiest toys you can find while I'm talking. And so, if there's also, I wrote a fairly popular blog post that I linked to from my site. I have a page that has some more graphs and discussion about service counts. So if you're really interested in seeing all the ways of counting services, you can go to that servicecounts.html page, and it's linked there. And so at the root of all of this is, like I said, AWS is incented to grow. So if there's a market need, they can put a team together and build a new product. And if they grab more market share, that's to their advantage. So there's inherently, you can see here, there's a driver in revenue that AWS gets. The more breadth they get. I think I was just reading something earlier today that Corey Quinn wrote in how, if there's a need, like there is no service that AWS produces that doesn't have someone that wants it. Not everyone will want it, but someone wants it. And so AWS just keeps addressing that, and that just makes this scope keep ballooning out. But you still have to be able to figure out which of those things are useful to you or not. And you can see here, this revenue chart is also exponential. So there's no reason, AWS can keep grabbing market share and keep pulling more services into the cloud. They will keep growing, and that's the problem we have to manage. So one other way to manage that I count services is just Cloud Pegboard's service catalog has a count of 288 different services at the moment, and that also includes some things, some tools like SDKs, and I also list hardware items like Deep Racer and Deep Composer. So there's a few extra items there, but it adds up. So there's, by the end of this year, there'll easily be 300 different items in the catalog. So you see that there's way too much to just sort of say, fine, I'll just kind of take it all in. So, and if you don't do something about it, and you just kind of let yourself go and blow with the wind, you'll just drift and drown. And so the advice, and this is again born out of what I did back at Novartis and managing a lot of people trying to do this, is to come up with a strategy to actively take control. And so you can turn this this breadth of AWS into the advantage that it really should be. And so I suggest a strategic approach, which is to build a plan, select whatever tools and rituals and behaviors that that to put in and build that use as the building blocks for that plan, and then because you probably won't get it right, and because things change, actively manage and adjust that plan over time, and because it is your personal plan. And if you think about this, depending on where you are in your career and level, especially as you get further and deeper into management, one day you realize like, I'm just surrounded by email and again, I'm paralyzed, right? So people have hit that problem in other places. And like, if you've hit that with email, you realize, well, at some point it got so bad that you said, I'm going to do something different. So you read, maybe you went to, reading your emails 3 times a day. Maybe you just moved everything to Slack. Maybe you stopped putting rules in place. Maybe you ignore people you don't know. Whatever it is, you've built a plan either explicitly or implicitly. And so it's that same sort of spirit that I think can be very useful to do with AWS information, because it's that important to be on top of it, I believe. So here I have some principles that I think can help. Because it's a personalized plan, I can't tell you what the plan should be. I think it should be personalized, but I can give you some principles that over time I've found have worked very well. So starting with the in the center there, which is kind of what I've said already, is be deliberate. Choose to make a plan. And then once you kind of bought into that idea, the first item is this idea of don't watch everything. That may seem pretty obvious. And so I put it here partly because sometimes it's important to give yourself some permission to not look at everything. Sometimes I do this at least. You worry like, oh, if I'm not reading everything, I'm missing out on something. Well, you're going to miss out on things. You're either going to be overly diluted or you're going to miss out on something. So give yourself permission to not watch everything. Because if you try, there's opportunity cost, there's time loss, there's stress, there's dilution. So that's sort of more of this principle to kind of maybe think about. The next thing that I think works quite well is this idea of focus on a particular area, but use your peripheral vision. And when I say an area, like if you're a cybersecurity expert, maybe that means just focusing on the cybersecurity domain and things that relate to that. Or if you're building a product, focusing on your particular solution, the services you need for your solution. But you're always, whether you like it or not, you're pulling stuff in through your peripheral vision. And sometimes you look left and right a little bit, but generally if you focus on that, you'll find the things you need to know, and then you'll slowly add on little bits on the side. And that's really just a good lens to as a way to look at things. And actually, if you think about it, I just thought about this now. This is the idea of the word lens is what AWS uses for a couple of their different places in the well-architected framework, and also some stuff they do within the APN area. If you do have this idea of focus, by definition, you're going to miss out on things that are new. So I think another element of your strategy should be, what is the technique I'm going to use to find out and to keep up with what's new? Because there are separate sets of things, the things that you're focusing on, things are new. And you shouldn't try to be expert at everything that's new, but you just want to see it come in, triage it, and decide, is that something that's relevant to me? And if it is, maybe you go deeper. And if not, okay, I know what it is, it's gone. For example, Amazon Bracket came out, and quantum computing. And I thought, that's kind of neat to know that Amazon's doing something with Amazon Bracket and quantum computing. That's all I need to know, I'm done, and I move on, right? And the same could apply for other capabilities, which actually ties in with the next item, which is to be service-centric. And the reason I say that is because services are just a nice boundary that makes sense and allows you to partition along service boundaries for things that you need to focus on or not. So it supports this idea of reviewing new and focusing. So for me, I really just don't care about Lumberyard or Outpost or GameLift. Elemental media services are not particularly relevant to me. So I just ignore everything that has to do with those, but I focus a lot on things like Lambda and DynamoDB and API Gateway, for example. Okay. So those are some strategies. And one of the things I put together is this page that's the so-called Cloud Information Overload Survival Guide, which is a list of assets and resources that you can look at to help build your plan. If I've hopefully convinced you, you should maybe build a plan. And even trying to figure out what all the information sources are is its own time sink. And so what I've tried to do is come up with what is generally a consensus for a good pick list of things to consider to put into your plan. So that's your palette. And it's wrong, for sure. And I'd love feedback on saying, oh, you forgot this and this and this. that would be great. But it's a starting point that I think can save you some time. And so on our palette, I group it into 4 categories that all build on each other. There's this notion of training, and so we have Musa from A Cloud Guru, which is fantastic. So today, and maybe some other people. My friend Mark Richmond might be there. Oh, there you are. Might be joined today. He's actually working for ACG now, also, but he's through acquisition of Linux Academy, which I just met him online a few days ago. In fact, so training is this fundamental basis that you just need to know because you got to learn your tools and how they work. But once you're trained, there's just way too much information. You just don't keep the stuff in your head. When you're actually coding, you need to look up limits and APIs, and it's just not something you remember. So you need to have some reference sources, and that's sort of a separate set of information and sources you need. Since things are not static, you need to somehow stay current, and there's a different class of resources that can help you stay current. And while these first 3 are self-service, sometimes you do need help, a second pair of eyes and or different experience or expertise. And so then that's where support comes in. I don't think people classically think of support as an information resource, but it is. It's just very targeted. You ask a question, you get an answer. So I consider that really part of this whole spectrum here. All right, so that's sort of where we are about here. There's this palette of things, how you're going to build up a plan. So let me walk you through the next 4 pages here just to give you a little bit of idea of what's in the survival guide, which has a little bit more information and has a way to vote things up and down and stuff. But just to give you a little bit of an idea of some of these resources that you can consider. So under training, so I highlight AWS training of this list here because it's a good resource. It's where I suggest you start, especially if you're new to AWS, to get the 30,000-foot view. And you might spend a few minutes there. You might use all the resources there, but it's at least where you should start and then decide how much you need. And training is very personalized, and because people have different learning styles. Your organization may have some enterprise licenses. You have different learning goals. You may want to be getting a cert or not. Maybe there's a cost as a factor. So there's a lot of things that will affect this. So you start with AWS and then make, I would say from this list here, pick 1 or 2 other things. You don't need to have a million training resources because someday you actually have to go and do stuff. So YouTube is useful. There's a ton of content out there. The expert point here that tip that I want to give is just be careful because the services are change, and so you should look at the dates because sometimes some of the content may be a little bit out of date. So just be a little bit careful about that. Then the next 3 items are all commercial training options. This is what I would consider to be a fairly consensus view of things that are generally well-respected training resources. And of course, A Cloud Guru, since I wrote this slide, has acquired Linux Academy, although at the moment they still haven't fully integrated, so they do have their own look and feel. And each of these products has a different differentiator. So Linux Academy may be a little bit more hands-on. A Cloud Guru is, everyone's got their own thing. I won't go into details of what's what. And there's some others, probably Udemy or Udemy, I'm not sure how you ever pronounce that, is probably maybe missing from this. Wiz Labs is a great resource for actual practice tests. But this is a good start, but your mileage may vary, decide what makes sense for you. Once you get to that references section, the nature of references is not going to be a lot of choices. AWS is, of course, the.
And can I interrupt real quick
please.
before you move on? So on the training side of things, one of the things that I really struggled with in kind of digging into AWS starting maybe 4 months ago, I really started looking at it closely and how do you get familiar enough to do something with it. One of the things that I found a real steep learning curve was simply the language. And this seems to be true across a lot of the clouds, that they take what is a common service that has a common, name, and they have to give it some
branding and
They have to make it, I don't know, AWS-y,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so it's like, it's just this blur of acronyms. And then they make an acronym out of it, of course, right? So it's a name plus an acronym. And so you have this blur of names and acronyms, and none of it makes any sense until you actually go, oh, that's just this
Yes.
service. Okay, now I know if that is relevant or not. How have others, or how are you helping people kind of navigate simply the, IAM is your, well, I guess there isn't a really good equivalent to that, but that's your, your Active Directory of AWS.
Yeah, well, in fact, the problem there is a great example. IAM is a term of art that existed before AWS. And AWS co-opted the term to mean something that's sort of in the space, but a little bit different. So
sort of, but not quite, right?
Right. And that's true for many things. So Yarrow, you're spot on. And one of the things I've got really accustomed to is because Cloud Pegboard catalogs all this. I've actually had to parse all these names, and I have a lot of code to try to figure out, well, what is this service? And like sometimes they name things differently. And like for every service, I have a list that varies between, let's say, 2 and 15 aliases for every one service that's in my database to try to help integrate all this data. So what I did at Novartis, which I think is maybe a good example, is I put together, so you guys could tell, like, I'm very excited about this and I talk too much, and I'm sorry. So I subjected all these people in the organization to, I originally did, when I just started this up, and basically a bunch of in-person trainings. And then eventually I said, wow, I have to keep repeating this. And it dawned on me, maybe I should record these. And so eventually I had hours of trainings that I did personally because I was sort of the pushing the frontier here, and made everyone watch it. And the goal of that was exactly what you're saying, which was, look, this may seem obvious and simple, but I'm going to tell you, like, this is what a region is. This is an availability zone. The thing you call data center matches to what, right? And there's training materials that do some of this stuff in places too, but I tried to do it for my organization and try to match our context and our language to what AWS was providing, and really made it a big point to do internal training, and maybe there are other resources that could do this as well, but to try to explain those basics. And I'll give you one other quick example. I brought in a product, it's a third-party provider called Turbot, which was awesome for what we had to do. It's guardrails and controls on the environment. Pretty simple concepts and how it works, but it too had yet another language. And the word account meant a different thing in AWS, it meant a different thing in our internal apps, and it meant a different thing in Turbot. And so I had another set of training, again, just to, let's all speak the same language first, then we can move forward. So yeah, I don't know, Musa, do you have a particular thought on that? Since
sorry, Ken, my 2-year-old just ran into the room. I've been trying to run away from him. But yeah, I just missed the last few sentences. What were we talking about again?
Yeah, no problem. I was saying, do you agree to sign up for all this? No. No, just saying, so I was saying to Yarrow that in my experience, I actually did some custom training to try to get people onto just to teach the vocabulary before getting into everything else, so that you can actually recognize when you have the vocabulary, now you can learn because it has a place in your head to put it. But if you don't recognize the vocabulary, you might not know where to put it. So from your experiences.
I 100% agree. I have met so many people who don't know what an EC2 instance is, but they are wizards with VMware and spinning up KVM VMs and what. So like, you can always like make beginner courses, and we do have that, but yeah, we could definitely increase our outreach of that information so that people are more aware of those, like, the start-in jargon. It can be overwhelming, and it is in most cases.
Yeah.
Ken, if I can jump in, a couple thoughts. The Amazon does try to have the terminology be consistent across the services, and so a good starting point might be the well-architected framework, because they're talking, at a high level. It's like, hey, resiliency, that means regions and availability zones. And I found that the well-architected framework is really the starting point, both for the concepts and the verbiage. The other thing I'll say is that I'm a community hero, and we get we have meetings when Amazon is coming up with new services, and we have long meetings about what do we think this such a service should be called, and at a certain level we're running out of the obvious things, and this is all NDA, but if you were going to be doing another type of compute, it's like, well, it's got to be elastic because everything's elastic. So it's the especially elastic compute service, EC3. I mean, I don't know. So it's a hard problem. The other suggestion I'd make is just in terms of services. One of the interesting things is to just in your AWS console pull down the pick a service, and it's grouped by topic. So there'll be compute, and then there'll be gaming, and I just ignore gaming, and then there'll be satellite ground station. And it's like, yeah, I wish I cared about that. Yeah. But you can find the areas that are interesting. And I think the last thing is, just like I explained to people that Apple products are completely intuitive after 4 or 5 years, Amazon terminology after 4 or 5 years is completely intuitive.
Right. And again,
lumberyard. What the hell? I mean, if I just ask you, what's lumberyard? And I think that's the service, but I have no idea what it is.
Right. I mean, and this is true. This goes back to, it took me a decade to figure out that Microsoft Exchange and Outlook, what they were, way back when Sun Microsystems had all sorts of products that were confusing. That we're always going to have that. Something that I like to do, and so maybe this is biasing it too much, but and like I said, I did all those videos, but I really like to get in front of a small handful of people, like the next team, and talk to them interactively and ask and kind of explain things to them. I don't know. I just find it's fun and interesting. But the thing is, you can gauge and you can sort of see the body language and okay, you get that, fine, let's move on. Then you can see like if someone knows something about VMware, then you can reference it to like, okay, well, vCenter, well, here's what the equivalent, you can start talking that way. And so depending on what your organizational situation is, sometimes just investing a little bit of time to give people enough foundation so that they can get some purchase, and then they can start climbing on beyond that. All right, I'm going to move on a little bit. Well, thanks for bringing that up. I think that's a really great point. And I'll show a little bit later some stuff that maybe we can help that as well. Actually, I'm going to even point to it now. So I was talking about how, so AWS is a source for much of this information, but it's not all the information. So Terraform or GitHub has different, so there's other information too. And I highlight here Cloud Pegboard as the highlighted resource for your toolkit. Partly because I'm, of course, biased, but really it was purpose-built to solve this purpose. That even once you get past understanding what AWS is, the information is scattered, and you can spend all day Googling, and you'd be surprised how much time you spend looking up information. It's extraordinary. And again, when you're looking at 500 people, and I'm trying to optimize the efficiency of that because it's really hard and expensive to hire engineers, I want to get the most out of them. And I realized that they're spending half their day searching for stuff. That was an issue, and that's, again, that background inspiration. So Cloud Pegboard is purpose-built to help you find information faster, and it's like a wrapper, like a dedicated search engine around AWS. And we'll see that a little bit more about that later. So the next one, this category is probably the hardest, which is staying current. And out of this list of items, I would say, you probably want to pick all of these because they're free and easy. And if it doesn't work, it's for you. Then you say, "Oh, I'll stop using this," and you just unsubscribe or or opt out or whatever it might be. So I'll just walk quickly through some of these things. again, biased, but I believe Cloud Pegboard, again, its whole purpose was constructed to help people keep up to date. It has, basically there's a personalized email that you can get on a daily or weekly basis for your particular interest and attributes and what services you care about. So it's designed to help you keep up to date. There's another resource, which is if podcasts is the sort of thing that works well for you. AWS produces some good podcasts, a lot of different content. And again, in the spirit of don't watch everything, you don't have to watch them all. But if you kind of look at which ones are relevant to you, then that's worth taking a peek. And in particular, so the expert hint here is that there's a monthly update show, 45 minutes, an hour long, and speed it up, of course, that summarizes all the announcements and news from the previous month. And so that may be one particular resource to keep in mind. Again, if you ever have a commute again, and you like to listen to podcasts on your commute, that may be an effective use of time and a way to keep up. Now, AWS has emails. You all probably get tons of them. And so that's sort of obvious. I put it here mostly because as a resource, I want to make it easy to find the links to everything. But part of the tip here is you can get inundated with too much stuff. And so use the Preferences Center to opt out of things that you find not particularly useful. Because when you get too much noise, you lose signal. So you want to just be deliberate about that again. So A Cloud Guru, and I didn't know we are going to have some from A Cloud Guru here. So now you can report back. Wow, Ken loves ACG.
You mentioned my other colleague, his name is Mark. He told me last minute. I was subscribed to this feed anyways, the Zoom link, but I just forgot. And he just pinged me like, hey, this is about to happen. Do you want to like join? I'm like, okay, absolutely. So sorry about joining last minute, not being prepared. But,
that's fine. That's great. Well, I'm super glad to have you here, and in Boston, even better, because I think Mark's in Florida. Anyway, so one of the things I find a sort of a surprising little delight in terms of keeping up to date was this video produced weekly by A Cloud Guru. It comes out either Sunday night or Monday morning. They're Australia, so they get a head start. And it's about 3 or 4 minutes. It only covers about 3 or 4 services a week. But what I find interesting about it is it's interesting to see what they chose to use with those 3 services they're going to pick to highlight. So that is instructive in its own right. It goes a little bit deeper and has an actual human being. It's not just a press release that's giving you a little bit of a spin and some insight into it. So, and then for me, my learning style is I learn best when I see things more than once. And so the second time in, I sometimes hear this, I say, I've read it. I read all my Cloud Pegboard status, which has everything. But then I see it again, I say, oh, now I get why that's actually important and useful. So I really like that. And then my expert tip here is there's an Alexa skill for A Cloud Guru. And I mean, it's a video, but it's all audio content. There's no video to look at really. And so on Monday morning during my workout, I just say, Alexa, ask A Cloud Guru what's new. And that's the specific phrase. And I did make sure to mute my Alexa before starting this talk today. And then while I'm working out, in 3 or 4 minutes, I've got this information that's been sort of interesting to me more than listening to the news, and yeah, it's good multitasking. So I think that's sort of a little bit of a sort of hidden gem. And finally, on this list here is a fairly popular newsletter by my friend Corey Quinn, who some of you may know, some of you never heard of him, but he's a pretty popular influencer. His newsletter is interesting. In some regards, it contains the same announcements that Cloud Pegboard contains, or even AWS for that matter. But there are a few differences. So for one thing, he also includes select blog postings that he finds across the web and includes those. And so that's not something you would otherwise see. And if you don't know him, his whole shtick is to be very snarky about everything. So it adds a little bit more color and entertainment. So like, if you're getting information from me, it's dry because I'm not a funny person. Corey's just got full of snark, and so yeah, that's nice. So anyway, so those are things you can check out. If they're useful, keep going. If they're not, then you just unsubscribe. But this, I think, is probably maybe the most important area. All right, finally, on the support front, the highlight here, there are a lot of ways of getting support, but is AWS support. again, I highlight because, well, people have varying experiences with AWS, or excuse me, with support and tech organizations. My personal experience, at least with AWS, is that 9 times out of 10, not only do I get the answer I need or the resolution, but I'm delighted with it. And I don't remember saying that with any other organization, and I'm not paid for Amazon to say that. So I really am happy with it. And I think people should make sure to use AWS support properly and to the right amount. I've used everything, all 4 levels, all the way up through when I had an enterprise support contract, and TAMs and architects on board, as well as developer and business support have also been good. And the free support is okay as well. But as high up as you can go, I recommend it. And someday I'll get around to writing a blog post on how to get the most of it, because I think there's things you can do. There's one day I did a chat with someone, and I was like, oh, I never did a chat before. And it was perfect. I mean, the experience for that particular problem was just amazing. And I had this really great interaction and got a result that would have taken days had I not got on the chat. Other things are best by, just asynchronous emails or issue postings. I guess I'll try to summarize my ideas on support to get the most out of AWS is, well, use the right channel for the type of problem. Spend the time to write a good issue, which is true for anything. Like if you're doing a Jira ticket or AWS, just because a lot of people don't, and you really should spend the time to be thorough, be detailed, pretend you're on the other side, and what questions are you going to be asked, and answer them all up front. It'll save you lots of go-arounds. I know it's a little bit of motherhood, but it's worth doing. The other thing is treat the person on the other side like he's your friend or she's your peer, which you should do because it's just the right thing to do. But also, I think you get better results. Just like if you're managing a team, it's better to be a good manager and empower people and listen to them and be supportive of them than just sort of saying, go do this for me. Well, same thing with someone in support. Treat them like they're someone working on your team that you're trying to motivate. And I think you get some good results. Okay. There's discussion forums. It's linked here. Everyone knows about the forums, so I'm not going to spend any time talking about that. But I would like to spend a moment to focus on using your peers for support. I think this is undervalued and underused and is really another gem. And again, this can vary depending on the size organization you're in. And when I say use your peers, that could be someone on your team, someone on a neighboring team, or it could be even across the old, like if you're in an organization that's big enough that you have divisions, maybe even someone in another division. And I really think that's important to use support in this way because it really helps cross-pollinate and share knowledge across the organization in sort of tacit sort of ways. But also, if you think about it, someone in your domain, in your organization, no matter where they are, they understand your context in your domain. And they're also probably a little bit more invested in your success than someone on a forum, let's say. And so you can often get a better answer because it has that background knowledge about what's about your domain. And I even had a case back where I saw this guy who was asking a question about using Internet Gateway, and person answered him saying, I could answer the question about Internet Gateway, but we're not allowed to use that here. You have to go through the corporate firewall and here pin it around and whatever. And the person said, oh, I didn't know that. So sometimes it's not even knowing the answer to a specific problem. It's within the context may make a difference. And remote people aren't going to know that. Yeah, please go ahead.
And sort of on the opposite end, in this meetup's Slack channel, Slack group, we have a channel called Technical Help. There's very, very little traffic in it, but this group has a lot of smart folks and folks with good connections. So, use the community. If you use the Slack channel and ask questions. If you have questions, post them in our meetup. The more we can be a community and help each other, the better. And we have a lot of smart folks here.
Absolutely. And we were talking earlier about this guy, Mark, that I met him on Slack, a different Slack, really just a few weeks ago. And he's you know, we're giving each other advice, and so like we've basically built a relationship very quickly, just because we decided to help each other out on some things. And yeah, so I think that's great. And we're trying to build our Boston Slack to get a little bit more critical mass so that we can really get, you know, more answers. So thanks, Brian. Yeah, so your peers in your organization across Slack is also, you know, and I've even seen places where, because you start talking, especially when you go across even organizational boundaries, that opens up job opportunities or other interactions you wouldn't otherwise have. So think about that. And again, if you're in a position to do so, of course, you can do anything can be done grassroots. You know, there are a lot of things you can do. You can create an internal Slack. You can have lunch and learns. We've also set up some forums. So there's we actually had an architecture review process, which was another way to get this going. So a lot of ways you can do it within your organization, but I encourage you to sort of spend some time thinking about, look first internal if you can. And as Brian said, there's Slack. So this next item here, of the Slacks out there, I probably don't know about a lot of them, but from my experience, the Open Guide to AWS Slack channel has been the most prolific and effective, smart people, helpful people. You can ignore the link there. I mean, you should use it, but you know, Slack links are hard to do because they change. And so Corey created this, you know, again, part of his snark. He came up with slackhatesthecloud.com, which I prefer he didn't, but yeah, it's his domain name, so he can do it. Anyway, so that's just a shortcut link. But anyway, and one thing I'd say about using Slack for support is don't try to use Slack as a replacement for using AWS support. You know, it's not really fair to the community to say, oh, I don't want to pay for support, so I'm going to use Slack. But when you do need it, it's a great resource, and there's just a lot of smart people and all. And I found it, the communities I've been in, almost exclusively smart and helpful people and good natured, not, you know, there's no toxic community around it. It's just great. Okay, so, oh, and the other thing I want to mention on that is when you especially go into some of these communities, just try to keep in your mind, it's better to contribute more than you take, which most people do. Every once in a while you see someone here's there and you see them question after question after question after question. You say, like, that's nice, but you know, that's a little bit one-sided. So, you know, I always try to contribute a lot more than I ask. Okay. So finally on the list here is Reddit. There is an AWS subreddit, and this is meant to be a consensus guide to give you links to the resources for you to decide what makes sense for you personally. Full disclosure, personally, I can't stand Reddit, and I just don't get it, and I don't get good results, and it bothers me. So, but that is just me. I know someone else who I respect deeply, and who thinks it's the best thing ever. So make your own choices. It's here. So that, yeah, you have to decide what works for you because everyone's got different style. All right. So Brian, I anticipated your thought there. Since we're talking about Slack, it's not necessarily at the critical mass it's at now a go-to support site, but it's somehow I needed to plug it here anyway. So we have a Slack. If you're not on it, I strongly encourage you to sign up for it. We don't yet have our own domain name, so I just use my personal link shortener to create one because the Slack links will change over time. If it ever doesn't work, you know, email me or something, and I'll make sure to fix it, or message me on the meetup board. Anyway, so there's the link you know, to sign up in. Maybe someone could also paste that into the chat or the raw link if you want, so people can sign up while we're talking here. All right, so this, like I usually, when I gave this talk at reInvent, I said, don't bother trying to write all these things down, take pictures of slides. You know, there was the guide is online, cloudpegboard.com/AWS. And I just used the /AWS just because I was trying to do something that was like a shortener, short and sweet. So anyway, it's a dynamic list. It's kind of a nice way that it brings everything into one spot so that you can kind of get to these resources. And like I said, this is a point in time, and I'd love your input to, you know, figure out, well, what am I missing? What should be promoted, demoted, added, whatever. Okay, so that's sort of the strategies and tools segment here. I'm going to shift gears a little bit now to do a little bit of a demo. Well, actually, I'm going to start with this. So we will start with my dog, Gracie, showing how to drink from a fire hose. I just like to do that. So, yeah, and she's now like 10 times that size. This was maybe a year and a half ago, I guess. Now she's a big old German Shepherd, but still likes to play eat the water. So I mentioned before, I created this startup to solve this problem. And it's really, Cloud Pegboard is this purpose-built reference source, as well as a way to stay current. And so I'd like to show you a little bit about the service. It's a free service, so you can all sign up and use it at will. And I want to use that context also then go into showing you the architecture of how it's built. So just a quick little preamble here. There's 5 or so main categories. There's also a Slack integration, which I'll actually add to the Boston AWS Slack channel at some point. I haven't yet done that yet. But there's basically, we have this catalog, the services table of all AWS services, which again helps when, like Yaro was saying, if you don't know what something's called, you can search for things easier. For every service, there's a unique data sheet that gives you everything you'd want to know about the service all in one place. To keep current, we have notifications, so there's daily or weekly emails that are personalized to your interests. So again, trying to find a way to filter out the information. And then something that's fairly new and I'm really excited about because it's just so much fun to build and to use, which is this a browser plugin that really just makes the console much more effective to use, and also, in fact, has tiebacks to Cloud Pegboard as well. And then finally, there's this notion of the sessions table, I call it, which is basically reInvent sessions, which is useful for when you're planning to go to reInvent, which probably won't happen this year, but it's also useful after reInvent, so you can have an easy access to the catalog of all the recordings and slides. So,
hey, and don't say that there's not going to be a reInvent. If they can open the hairdressers, we can bloody well have a reInvent.
Yeah, well, I spent a half hour on the phone with my mom last night telling her, just because it's open, you're not going. And she's like, I want to go. I said, no. So, yeah, I mean, it might still. I'm guessing it won't, but we'll have to see. So let me give you a switch to a screen share of my browser. And then after that, we'll come back and do our first giveaway, if that sounds okay. Let's see if I can kill that. And I think that's the right window. And I feel like actually, unfortunately, the way my screens are set up so I can see what I'm showing, I don't actually get to see you guys quite so directly. And again, different from a room. I only have a small, Brady Bunch group. So I'm missing the body language. Like, are you guys with me? Is this interesting? Or do you have any questions? I feel like I'm shotgunning. So I'll just pause for a moment and see if you have any questions that you want me to address before I move into this demo here. Robert, I see you were talking, but I didn't hear.
Yeah, I can go for pizza and beer. Who's got it?
Well, actually, next week, no, in 2 weeks, when Cloud Zero. So, like I said, I'm no fun. We're giving away AWS credits. There'll be pizza slice delivery will be given away by Cloud Zero next week. So,
and we've tried to get company hosts to do gift certificates for Drizzly. But most companies, unfortunately, the lawyers are still alive, and so they've nixed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I almost did that because I found there's a beer that's made in Waltham called Cloud Candy. I don't actually drink, so I didn't. Maybe everyone knows about that, but I was like all thrilled. But anyway, maybe another day. Okay. So here's Cloud Pegboard. This is just the home page here, and one of the things that I always do is I have a shortcut in my bookmarks bar, and just to really get the most out of this, I usually click right on this dashboard page here, which is the same thing as this data sheet. So So basically, you can click on this datasheet page, and so what you start with is on the top here, you see this list of services. And this is a personalized list I created. I just happen to call it Pegboard. That relates to a bunch of services I used for the Cloud Pegboard architecture. And if I click on these icons, you'll notice down below, the data is changing on the data sheet to match the particular service. So this is a service data sheet, a bunch of information, and this list is up here. I can also search for information. So if I just type fraud detector, I just type FR and I get my fraud detector, and then I can just search and that shows up down here. You can see some other information immediately, though, oh, that's in preview, and that kind of highlights that and some other information about it. And then all my recent searches are here. So again, it's very easy to find something you either searched for recently or something that's in one of your predefined lists. It's just really one click away. Want to get information about 53, I just click on it, and that's all right here. And you can change what list you're on. I happen to have way more than you would typically have. But I mentioned that I also work for Miles for Migrants, and so that's a whole separate project, account, everything. So here, this is the list of services. So while I'm in the context of working for Miles for Migrants, I pick this list, and so these things are all at the ready for me. So I happen to use QuickSight there. I don't use it really substantially for Cloud Pegboard, so that shows up in that list. Okay, so that's a basic idea of how these lists work. Let me go back to my Pegboard list. There's a notion that Pegboard is my default, so when I open up the page, it automatically comes up to this list here. And it's super easy to create new lists and to add and delete services from them. All right, so I'll click on DynamoDB. I think that's always a good example. And maybe just give you a quick tour of what's in one of these data sheets and why I say that, why reference information is so easy to get to. So once I'm on the service, the basic identifying information you saw, whether or not it's GA or not, which is sometimes helpful to know. Sometimes you need an icon. You can just click one of these icons and it'll automatically download in different SVG, PNG, whatever. But then here you start getting into the links to the documentation. And some of this would be pretty straightforward to get from AWS. But sometimes, so for example, the pricing page is usually, but not always, linked to the product page if you're on the AWS page. Security documentation is almost always buried somewhere. So here I'm basically just pulling everything together. So I just click through and I get to the security and compliance doc specifically for DynamoDB, right? Then again, a non-AWS source, I don't know if anyone knows who Jerry Hargrove is, but he does this nice diagrams, a special service that you haven't used before. It could be handy to kind of go to his diagram, just try to get the gestalt of what it does for you. So that's kind of a bunch of information, just one click away in the documentation section. When you're developing, you can look at this section here to quickly just see the basic information. So like if I'm looking for S3, sometimes I can never remember what the ARN syntax is for S3. So here it's immediately there. Obviously, the IN prefix for S3 is obviously S3, but for some other things, it's a little bit less obvious. And so sometimes it's handy to have that. And again, here, there's an immediate click through. So one thing that I use a lot when you're trying to build a policy is like, okay, maybe I remember that it's DynamoDB all lowercase or not, but assuming I do, but I still like, what's the camel case on create table? And in fact, what kind of resource does it require? So basically you can now quickly get to all these resources, which I find this particular thing useful when I'm trying to build a policy. And again, same thing if you're using CDK, you can just quickly get to the right space. You don't have to kind of do all this navigation on the left side. You just get to write what you're looking for there. All right, so I won't go into that anymore, but you kind of get the point. We catalog all these different code samples that are available. So if I'm in DynamoDB, Python, I see a bunch of these things. Maybe I'm a Go developer, fewer samples. So basically it's just a lot of, you can quickly get to the code samples. If you need to know what compliances, again, when I was at Novartis, that was a bigger deal. So what compliances are available. Tips and tricks is not actually well filled out just yet. This is my company thing, which is for enterprise use, which really doesn't affect most of us. Anyway, so I'll come back here. Let's see what. Well, okay, we've been talking about training a bunch today. I automatically pull in all this training for this particular service. So while you're looking up the service, you decide you need some more training information. you can get quickly to that. And then, I talked about the 2,000 announcements, 2,500 blog posts a year, and growing. So one of the ways that we make that a little bit easier is we suck all that information in and we categorize it by service. So I can present it back in reverse chronological order by service. And so, because sometimes, when the thing comes out, if you're watching an RSS feed, that's nice, but that may not be the time that you need it. So here you can kind of look at what's been going on in the service, especially if it's not one you've been looking at actively. So a couple more things here. We got this technical information. So whether or not there's encryption at rest on a service, or whether it has VPC support, which used to be a much bigger deal. Now that's getting much more coverage. But here you can actually notice that DynamoDB's got gateway, not interface type. And, but also you can see how many regions it's supported in the particular regions. And an example of some of the personalization we do throughout is I've actually personalized, I'll show you quickly in my profile, this my regions thing. I've basically said the regions I'm most interested in are Frankfurt, Milan, which is brand new. So I just kind of fake put that in there. I don't really do anything in Milan. East and West US. So since it knows that, it's highlighting those 4 regions in this region list here. And that's all well and good. So this gives me confirmation that, yeah, if I'm going to use a service, it's in the regions I care about. But let's say I'm going to use a simple email service, for example. Well, you see it's a shorter list. It's only got 10 items. And if I click that 10, it drives me back to the AWS doc that lists these. But only 3 of them are, I can't highlight that way. Only 3 of them are shown here because one of them, Milan, is not supported. And so that's flagged here that I have Milan in my preferences list, but it's not supported. So it gives me this quick heads up. So one more thing, actually, let me go back to Dynamo. It's a more interesting example. So I mentioned we've got some reInvent information. We show that in a couple of different ways. So when you're planning for reInvent, and if you've gone to reInvent, it's a big deal to plan for the catalog of 3,500 items and decide what to pick. And I'm not going to talk about it in too much detail because I think we probably won't need to, although I hope we do. I do a bunch of stuff to make that much, much easier to show you the sessions that will be available on a given service. So it's a different way to look at. But after reInvent, we catalog all these. So this is a list of all the sessions in reInvent that my automation decided relate to DynamoDB. And actually, interestingly, I use comprehend and some heuristics to try to figure out what the service relates to based off its title and abstract. So you see this list here. Those are, so if you're interested in DynamoDB and you didn't get to go to reInvent, and even if you went, you couldn't go to all these sessions, all the information, all that content is here. And you can click on the YouTube icon, the slides, and some of these I've even got audio downloads that you can use as well. So that's one way to look at it on a per service basis. So maybe I'll look at I don't know, SNS, see if that has anything interesting. So it's got a different set of sessions there, and you can see there's come back to DynamoDB. So there's another thing I have, this reInvent page here. Takes a few seconds to load up because it loads in every session that exists. And there's different ways of looking at this. This can give you different filters for when you're planning. So you can decide, add to a wish list. Oh, I think I might want to go to that session and what's scheduling and all that. Again, I'm going to not talk about that more now. I'm going to talk about sort of after the event where you can now have a catalog of all the media that exists. So coming back from reInvent, you can, or asynchronously, you can really get all that same content here. You can search for it easily. You can filter on different attributes. And one of the things I think is really cool is I have this notion of a wish list that if you're planning for reInvent is things that you might want to put on your schedule, but afterwards you can use the same thing. You check things off that you might want to watch, and then as you watch them, you just unclick them, and so that you can do this filtered list here to get a list of things I want to watch. So here, if you just click on this, I can get the abstract, click through to get to the YouTube video, or download the M4A file, or go straight to the slides if you want to get that. So that's kind of how we tie in the reInvent thing. Again, it's another information source that, being very service-centric, if you're back, looking at a service and you want to know more about it, I don't know, well, time stream I'd click on, but the answer is time stream is the service that will never get released. But now personalized is one. I went to a bunch of stuff on personalized because I care about that particular service. And so, here's a bunch of sessions that if I didn't get to go to them, I could just kind of find them. Okay.
So Ken,
Yeah, please.
you're giving a tour of Cloud Pegboard, and this seems the overview you're giving, and I think this was intentional on your part. This is about kind of putting blinders up and being able to focus on the portion that you care about, in order to kind of ignore the if it's all too much. Yeah. Trying to pay attention to everything. But you also mentioned in your initial slides and in your presentation that part of the learning cycle is kind of using your peripheral vision. Are you doing anything to facilitate kind of that peripheral vision in Cloud Pegboard?
Yeah, a couple of ways, and then there's one which I'll tell you about which I haven't implemented. So you shamed me into it. I'll have to prioritize. But yeah, so for one thing is the emails, which I haven't shown, which maybe I should segue to that. Running a little bit late, actually, it looks like. Anyway, so there's the emails has this notion of, actually, let me just not talk about it. Click on the window. So let me switch the emails here. So this notion I mentioned that you have to have a strategy for watching what's new. If you opt into the email, whether it's daily or weekly, this is an example of a daily email. There is, sometimes there's some announcement or something at the top, but there's always this section here, new services. And so this is, and even if it's daily, this same content will appear for a 7-day cycle until it ages out, so that, just in case you don't look at it every day, whether you're looking daily or weekly, you'll see this for 7 days. And so any new service that appears will show up here. And this is a link back to the data sheet, the tagline, and so you're aware of what comes in. So this is one place here in this new services section to be aware of changes in that part of peripheral vision. The other part is in these announcements, actually, sometimes the matching I do, I think sometimes is not quite right, to be honest, but it's a bleeding match. So
are you in another window right now? I think we're only seeing the circle.
Oh, okay, that's a problem. Thanks for telling me. Yeah, hold on. Let me stop share that. Yeah, many thanks for telling me that. I should. Okay, there we go. All right, so here's what I was talking about, the sort of a preamble, some announcements, and here's that new services section, right? So, so for example, pricing calculator. This was early May. I think I grabbed this sample. Any new services will show up here for that 7-day cycle. But then also, as you look through, the fuzzy matching on these things will tell you some other things that are going on. I'm trying to see if I can find a good example. And so that helps by looking at these. You're looking at S3, but sometimes because if a service how do I say? If an announcement talks about, hey, there's an announcement about S3 moving, with database migration service, whatever. That announcement will actually appear in both those places, and so you can kind of pick up on it in that way. The thing I was mentioning that I want to do and just haven't got to it for various reasons is eventually build a recommender service. So like we notice that you're using, because you have in your list of services DynamoDB and Lambda, for example, but you're not using X-ray. So but maybe you might be interested in X-ray. So that's another way to do that. And the other thing is that peripheral vision is also not so much even from what Cloud Pegboard does. It's just that's just the way life is. That when you see things, you're doing things. There's this natural splash zone. But and here it's through the new services section, as well as the fact that these are fuzzy matches. That services are often mentioned with each other, and so if they sort of make sense to connect, you'll kind of catch it that way. So actually, while I'm here, I wanted to show this anyway. So this is an example of, and what a lot of my users don't do as much as I really wish they would, is there's an ability to say watch all, and you'll catch everything. And sometimes that's useful for sure. Other times, again, if you have a finite list, if you can filter that down, So here I have a list for a diagram, actually I can show you in a minute, that has like 8 services in it. And so this particular day, 5 of them were mentioned. And so I got CloudFront, EC2, RDS, and S3. And then that's it. And so I find these things, I can look through them, and I'm done. Whereas I think I have, like, according to that, if I open up, actually you can see here, so you have 5 personalized daily updates, but the same thing with different preferences gave me 46. And because it's incredible how much stuff AWS cranks out, because they're trying to keep engaged. So here you got code build and data sync, Beanstalk, media convert. There's always something going on somewhere. So these are these bullets are news and news, basically announcements and blogs. But then you'll see some things here which are, because I suck in and structure all this information as well, attribute changes. So here there's a region change in lake formation. I'll scroll down. Security Hub shows up in the new Cape Town and Milan regions. What else I got here? Well, here's another one that, again, if you were interested in CloudWatch Synthetics, there was no announcement on this, but I picked up the fact that there's a CDK URL now, so now it means the CDK support. It wasn't before, and so on. And then here, like key spaces, which is the rename, just because life is never easy with naming. They renamed the managed service, whatever it was called. Actually, now I can't remember. Managed Apache Cassandra is now key spaces. You can see that now they've declared that it has a VPC interface type and so on. And you see again, compliance again, and then some of these attributes I can choose to say, give me compliance information or not. That'll show, because maybe I just don't care about it. Or even same thing, you could say, please silence any region information because I just don't need to know about changes in regions. So those are just some of the different ways you can manage from the email. So let me switch back to the other screen, if I can find it. You're probably not seeing the right thing. It's not green. I have no idea what I'm sharing with you. You do not see a table, do you?
No, it's a blank screen.
All right, let me try this again.
Maybe time for the giveaway?
Yes, just give me 2 seconds to get the screen correct. Yeah, I don't know. Well, okay, since I don't know what I'm doing yet, let's do that. So, hold on. Let's go to play from slide. All right. And there. Okay. It's hard to share. All right, so now you can see the slideshow again?
It says cloudpegboard.com. Live demo.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so there's the demo. Okay, so here we go. I hope someone knows the MyPython reference here. So you can solve this. There's going to be a question that you're going to put the answer into the chat. The first person with the correct answer wins $25 AWS credits. And you can use Google, although I will say that if you use Cloud Pegboard, which it'll be faster, so we'll see. Maybe this will be a test to see if the product really does what it's supposed to do. All right. So that makes sense? Here we go. So for AWS step functions, you need to know the IAM prefix, the CLI command, and the CloudFormation resource type. Hello, Doug. It is not an African swallow, and it's not blue. Well, I should play some Jeopardy music. Of course, there's always the possibility that everybody on the call here has enough AWS usage from where they work that they don't need credits. No one's actually going to ever type anything. All right, well, I'm going to let that go. So whoever wants that, so IAM prefix, the CLI command, and the CloudFormation resource type. So use Cloud Pegboard, step functions data sheet, or you can Google these things individually and we'll see what we get. All right, so you know, one of the things we did here, so I think we have till 7:30, is we had a good discussion of some other things that chunked it some time. So I'm not going to go do any more demo, but I will say there's, so I think I showed you most everything, but just to tell you what I skipped is there's a services data, the catalog, which lists all the services. So which is, you know, you can do it yourself. You can, anyway, so I mean, sign up for Cloud Pegboard and look at the service table. Just it's one of the things there, and so you can see what that does. It's pretty obvious. But the other thing is the this console extension is really cool, and so maybe I have some time after I can show you. But again, you can also just try it yourself. But it's worth doing. But I do want to dive into the architecture that I promised. So here you can see, you know, so Cloud Pegboard. It's essentially started as a single person startup, but which means that it's bootstrapped and I'm not charging anything for it. So, so that's a really constrained problem. But I do want to make this work for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and eventually more. And I don't want to spend any time doing any maintenance. So strategically, I've chosen a serverless architecture. You can see it here. In the interest of time, I don't think I need to go through any of this. I'm just going to say that, you know, it's a pretty straightforward architecture logically. And so, but I also wanted to make sure it was disaster tolerant and fault tolerant. So I'll tell you a little bit of story about how we get there. Oh, hold on, I'm just gonna go back for a second, just make sure. I think we got an answer. So I see states, step functions, awesome. So the first one is Emily.
Yay.
With the honorable mention to Bipin. So congratulations, Emily.
Thank you.
If you're on Slack, then you could just DM me after this, and
Sure. Yeah, I'm on Slack.
I'll send you the code. So thanks for playing. That was fun. All right, awesome. Oh, actually, so I should ask, did you get that from Googling or from using Cloud Pegboard?
I had to sign up for Cloud Pegboard, so I didn't right now.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Okay, good. It'll be interesting if you go back and do the same thing and see if you think it's faster, because now you've gone through the exercise. Okay. And out of curiosity, Bipin, how about you? If I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right.
No, you got it right. I actually use Cloud Pegboard.
Yeah, I see that now. Okay, awesome. Okay, well, fantastic. All right, so I'm gonna. So thanks, guys, and I'm going to now go back to the architecture part. So, you know, basically, it's a quote I say a lot. So it's basically, to use the right tool for the job, you need to know what your tools are and what they can do, right? And because AWS, you know, has so much information, that's why this becomes very important. But my idea is that if you know what the right tools are, you can really amplify your productivity substantially. And that's why I think this is a good example of that. So here's the architecture, pretty straightforward serverless architecture. And it's naturally already fault tolerant because serverless managed services spread across AZs. And this gives me easy scaling, zero maintenance. But the problem with this is still a single region solution. There are some global services, but you know, I'm vulnerable to a single region failure. But since I really believe in infrastructure as code religiously, really, if you do that, in this case it was CloudFormation, could be anything, I just basically reran it in a different region, and now I get a full replication across two regions. That there's another sort of, I say, philosophical thing I have, especially when I believe when you shift from an enterprise thinking to a cloud native thought, a lot of us have been brought up talking about disaster recovery. And I got a blog on this. I don't believe in disaster recovery in the cloud. I think that's just a term that shouldn't be carried over. It should be disaster tolerant or fault tolerant. And so instead of having an active passive, it really doesn't cost you much to replicate. It basically built an active architecture, which is just really easy to do because of infrastructure code and the whole way the cloud works. There is a bit of a trick, which is replicating state if you really want truly active. And this goes to show this other thing I like to say a lot, which is not how much you invest in this thing. It's really just the tools you choose and or the features within them. And so here's a story, if you think about how I did this, where the static data is in S3. And so by using S3 versioning, and then basically one line of CloudFormation, I get cross-region replication. And it's kind of for free. It's pretty magical, I think. But then this idea of watching and focusing on services. So I'm watching CloudFront, and this is like a year and a half or almost 2 years ago. I see coming through this notion of origin failover as a new feature to CloudFront, which would be easy to have missed. But because I was able to see and keep focus and see that, again, it's a line of CloudFormation, and now I have origin failover so that if the primary S3 region fails over, because it's now replicated, CloudFront will take care of routing to the alternate region for me, much like a load balancer would. Without any DR activity, no alarms, no nothing, it just works and then fails back when the primary region recovers. A similar story can be done with DynamoDB. So again, DynamoDB used to not have global tables, and you can do a similar thing with RDS as well, I should point out. And then around 2017, you're watching DynamoDB because that's in my focus area, and see this notion of global tables, which is awesome. And so you have multi-master replication that you can just add fairly easily to DynamoDB. And then turn on a couple other things like standard backups using AWS Backup, as well as the relatively recent feature of point-in-time recovery, which is in DynamoDB. So again, knowing these features coming through, I just turn them on, and all of a sudden I get all this wonderfulness. Now, there are some tricks in the 2017 version of global tables. So, for example, you couldn't add a table into a global table group unless the tables were empty, which is really creates these weird catch-22 situations. But again, watching DynamoDB, late last year, they added a new version of the 2019 version of DynamoDB tables, of global tables. And that just kind of makes it trivial. Again, just like a couple of bits to flip, and all of a sudden you have this miraculous global tables. And then finally, for compute, now that we have our state replicated, you can put together, put in an API gateway in front of this. Lambda is already naturally, easily scaling and fault tolerant. And then instead of using a edge optimized API gateway where you're basically going to be in one region, even though you have edges across the world, I use region optimized. I'm using the wrong term. I'm using regional API gateways so that I can be deliberate about failing over to one or the other. And then in front of that, again, just using a feature, as all these things are, just what features do you use? You have to know about them. And using the feature of latency routing, you could also have used failover routing if it was active-passive. But by using active-active, I can use latency routing and get a little bit of performance benefit, but mostly means combined with health checks, if one region goes out, it'll automatically, Route 53 will send it over to the surviving region and fail back. No muss, no fuss. I'm going to skip this, but just the story here is on the back end, I'm using Lambda and step functions, which are amazing. I just love step functions to help orchestrate some of this stuff. Pinpoint is in there, it's not on the diagram. But basically, I'm using this richness of available tools to pull together to build a fairly robust service with essentially, very little cost and/or effort and no maintenance. And so here's kind of the list of all these services are being used inside Cloud Pegboard, And can you imagine if I had to build any of these things individually? So this is, again, a story for why you don't use the right tool, and in particular serverless, but even if they were non-serverless, I'd have to be deploying software and running servers and maintaining them and patching them. And so all this is because I was able to use the right tools and know what's going on. So, again, so it's not how much you invest. And I think this is sort of a proof point of that if you just know what the right tool is and you know how to use them and what their capabilities are, if you can bring that to bear and you can get this huge leverage that you can build fairly robust service and capabilities by just choosing the right tools, and don't have to spend lots and lots of money to build DR and to build out a complete capability. So I guess the big message here is, coming back way back to the beginning, is if you can take active control, I encourage you to do that of this information flood. Make a personalized plan. Doesn't matter what's in it, but as long as it makes sense for you. Pick some tools, behaviors, rituals, patterns, and then kind of evaluate them and watch how they work. And if they work well for you, adjust, or adjust when they don't work well. And just kind of keep that being on top of it, because if you kind of let your guard down, stuff will happen and you're missing opportunities. And I've seen that just many, many times. So I encourage you to do that. I think it's healthy. Again, if you want all the links, the survival guide is just cloudpegboard.com/AWS. My shameless plug is, it's free service, so I guess I'm not too shameless about it, is, sign up for Cloud Pegboard, and I'd love to hear from you guys, especially because we're kind of this community here. I really would love the people that I can connect with more easily, more frequently, and can actually, speak to sort of face-to-face and or chat. Love to get feedback, let you know what, if it's not solving some need, then let me know. I'm super responsive, and all the best features have come when someone says, "Oh, I can't do this." I say, "Well, I like solving problems, so let me solve that." Okay. Sorry, I kind of rushed through a bunch of that there. I'm not sure, I've lost my clock here. So, so I saw if that sounded a little bit rushed, but I want to make sure we got through everything. I do have another, don't go yet, because I do have another credit to give away. This time, if Jen can post the survey for, like we do at every one of our talks, into the chat. If you click on the survey, you don't have to answer it this second, although please do shortly after the call. There's a question in the survey. You may need to scroll down. It says contest. So if you could go find that, and then again, the first person to type the answer into the chat will win our next giveaway. And I'll be kind to you and I won't sing the Jeopardy music, although I'm really tempted, but you really don't want that.
Just to riff while people check out the survey, I want to say thank you, Ken. That's an enormous amount of work for, it would be an enormous amount of work for a paid service. It's kind of amazing that you're willing to do all that as a free service. And I'll say just for myself, simply the organize all the reIndent sessions into a coherent place. That's an incredible service right there. Sorry, I'm just looking at something there. So I think we have a winner.
Yes, Chip. Thank you. Oh, actually, wait. I'm sorry. I read from the bottom up. No, Kim. So awesome, fantastic. And Kim, did you just know that, or was that something you said? Oh, let me quickly Google. So fantastic. Well, again, if you could Slack me, and I will be sure to give you the code. And if not, and anyone can also, anytime anyone's interested, Slack is probably the best, especially the Boston AWS Slack. But I just dropped the slide, but Ken at cloudpegboard.com works as well. And if you want to follow me, you can, at Cloud Pegboard. I don't tweet much. But there's some stuff there every once in a while. I try to only speak when I have something to say. So sorry, Brian, to interrupt you. That was excited that Emily and Kim have won our awards.
Yeah, no. Contest winner is always good. And I was just going to say, besides the thank you, we're trying to maintain our every other week cadence. So we're always looking for more. I mean, we have the next 2 meetings after this, I believe, scheduled, but we're always looking for more talks. We're trying to get a Cloud Guru maybe to do some training. Also have reaching out to Amazon to see if they will do some direct training for us. But we're a community. We can do all kinds of different talks. We can do one long talk like we've had today. We could also do, we've talked about having a series of lightning talks. That can be really interesting and gives more people a chance to talk about something. So if you've got some side project, so I'd encourage you, if you've got a side project that you might want to, talk for 10 minutes about, let us know and we'll assemble those into a lightning talk evening. We could also do panel discussions if people have topics that that they want. So we want to make this as useful as possible, and as we all get through this this crazy time we're in.
Yeah. So thanks for that, and I also want to repeat. So thanks to Brian and Jen for helping to organize everything all the time. And keeping it so smooth because you don't see all the stuff that takes when it goes behind the scenes. I'll also say that please fill out the survey. It's only take a minute, and even when it's not in the survey, just really provide some feedback. And we talk about talks and such, but you could if you have any ideas, like just to seed the discussion a little bit. One of the things that I thought might be useful is someone has an architecture that they'd want to have an architecture review. I mean, we wouldn't get 50 people on to do it, but maybe we could have some breakout sessions to review your architecture with you and give some feedback, or just kind of be creative and imaginative, because that's what's neat about a group like this is we can make it happen, right? And especially if everything's virtual, there's the overhead of saying, well, we're all going to drive into some place in Cambridge and find parking. And so it really, that kind of limits your creativity. But now with, we can opt in, it doesn't even have to be on schedule or something. We can just choose to do something. So yeah, anyway, so kind of what Brian said, and feel free to, we get this interesting medium that lets us be a little bit more ad hoc and casual. And you just so be creative and give feedback, and we'll see what we can do.
Yep. And then the last thing I'll just say, just to preview the next 2 meetups. In 2 weeks, we have Cloud Zero is going to talk to us about how to build a massive scale serverless machine learning pipeline for less than $7 a day. And we're going to give away 2 gift cards and then a $75 pizza card. You can get a lot of pizza for $75. And then 2 weeks after that, we're going to have Carmen Fontana is going to give a talk on IoT as a platform, including Amanda, but I can't say that word. And they'll also have, and she heard me anyway.
It's whisper mode.
Right. So Jen, could we have a feature where I could say, Alexa, but say a word first, and to say, don't listen to this? Ignore Alexa.
Change your device name to Echo.
Yeah.
So just use Alex.
Yeah. Anyway, so we got a couple great meetings coming up, and let's really think about doing a lightning talk evening. A bunch of little 5-minute, 10-minute talks. It's great for us to see the variety of things that you're doing, and I'll also put out there, especially for folks who might be employment insecure. You give a lightning talk, a 10-minute lightning talk. you get to put on your resume that you gave a presentation. That's a lot of bang for the buck.
I'll also say, actually, building on that, Brian, if you're not comfortable presenting, this is actually a great place to sort of practice and kind of desensitize and get used to it. And I would go so far to say that actually a couple of things. I may be a good or a bad presenter, I don't know. Well, but I'm happy to mentor and coach. I mean, even if I stink at things, I'm actually a pretty good coach on things. So I'd be happy to coach and mentor anyone, especially if they're trying to get used to this and break into it. And we could even, you know, if you wanted to say, look, I don't want to do it, but you know, we could just get 4 people, 5, whatever the right number is. Again, we can do things like that. So to give you some opportunities and just, you know, I think that's what's good about a community, is that we can be flexible and do things to help each other out. And you know, I'll be happy to do my share and you know, if I can help you. And this is a great forum to do that, get some experience, because once you break the ice, then it's a lot easier. And then, you know, maybe someone sends you to a larger talk or maybe do some webinars. And again, it's good for your career, and it's also, it feels good. It's fun if you know, when you talk about something that you know something about, get to share.
Okay. Anyone else, or perhaps we're at a wrap? Okay. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate everyone's time tonight. Hope it was useful in some fashion.
Don't forget the survey, please.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great talk.
Thank you.
Hey, Rob, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Brian. I gotta look you up.
Well, we could do the social distance drinking. You know, it's
Virtual happy hour. I'm a fan.
indeed. Well, we've also been just gathering in our backyard around a fire pit. You know, 10 feet apart. And
That sounds awesome.
yeah,
Sounds awesome. Let me ping you on Facebook.
all right, sounds good.
All right, man.
All right, I'm going to close the meeting. See you guys. See you, everybody, I should say.